With God, there is not such a thing as a perfect excuse. An excuse, in most cases, is a reason or explanation put forward to defend or justify a fault or offense. Making excuses is an all human pastime, but with God there is not such a thing as the perfect excuse. In Luke 14:16-20, we find what is known as the parable of the banquets. There's a parable about excuses and its consequences. He says, then he said to him, a certain man gives a great supper and invite many, and send his servant at supper time to say to those who were invited, come, for all things are now ready. But they always one accord began to make excuses. The first says to him, I have bought a piece of ground, and I must go and see it. I ask you to have me excused. And another say, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I am going to test them. I ask you to have me excused. Still another say, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. The man in verse 16 represents God in this parable. Jesus says there was a great supper, meaning there was enormous, filled with entertainment and joy. It wasn't a special one. It says that the host invite many. Actually, Jesus is talking about all those who God called, starting with the Israelites. Verse 17 tells that he sent his servants with the message, come, for all things are now ready. But what happened? Israel rejected him. Isaiah 53:1-3 says, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shot, and like a root out of dry ground. He has no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain, like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Today, God extends the invitation through those who share the gospel of Jesus Christ. Hebrews 1:1-2 declares, in the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets and many times and in various ways, but in this last day, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom also he made the universe. But what happened? Like the guests of the parable, many are making excuses now. To make excuses is the same as refusing or reject the invitation, and by implication, snubbing the host. When someone rejects the message, making excuses and self-justifying, in reality is rejecting God himself. But let's talk about the excuses, which at first looks reasonable. Verse 18, the one there, he said, I'm going to see a field. The excuse meant that he had important business to deal with. Another one said that he has to test the oxen. He both so the excuse was that he could not attend because he has to work. And the last guess, according to verse 20, uses an excuse talking about the family matters to decline the invitation. I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. All those excuses, as I said earlier, look reasonable, but no one, the rejected person, is God. Because when it comes to be called by him, there is not such a thing as the perfect excuse. Verse 21 says that the master of the house became angry, meaning that he felt and expressed a strong displeasure. Jesus declared, according to John 15:22, is I have not gone and spoken to them, they would not be guilty of sin, but now they have no excuse for their sin. God has justified reason to be angry with many. Romans 1:18-21 says, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Seeing what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible quality, his eternal powers and divine nature, has been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave to him, but their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. What does God do when he is rejected? Verse 21 got the answer. Go out. In other words, it's those who were invited first didn't want to stay, making invalid excuses. Bring in the poor, those around who were not originally considered to be guests in the banquet. We see the result in verse 22. When the servant returned, they said, Master, it is done as you commanded, and still there is room. But the master still was not satisfied and commanded to his servants, go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in. In other words, reach out those quite farther. The complete statement is, compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. John 14:1-6 records that Jesus declared, you believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And as I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going. The words of verse 24 are a drastic statement. I tell you, no one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet. Who is he talking about? He refers to those who declined the invitation. And I want to call your attention on a couple of things. The first is that God makes a friendly invitation. And a friend invites, but a ruler imposes. The second is that the banquets were considered an expression of fellowship between host and guest. Excuses are the main reason to be banned from God's banquet, which is a metaphor of heaven. The calling to attend the banquet was not an unexpected announcement, since in ancient times protocol followed a routinely previous invitation. Last-minute cancellation was considered rude and an escort to the host. So the calling con implies that each of those who excused themselves had previously confirmed their attendance. It once then states their priority. They, as I say, seems to be value excuses to see a field. For this guest business was first. The other one has to trade an oxen. For him work was first. And the excuse of the later was that he got married. In other words, family matters were first. In all cases, God is last in the list of priority. Luke 14:20 says, Jesus says, I quote from the Message, anyone who comes to me but refuses to let go of father, mother, spouse, children, brothers, sisters, yes, even one's own self, can be my disciple. And Matthew 19:27-29 records that Peter answered him, we have left everything to follow you. What then will there be for us? And Jesus said to them, truly I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who has followed me will also sit on 12th throne, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses, or brothers, or sister, or father, or mother, or wife, or children, or fields, for my sake will receive 100 times as much, and will inherit eternal life. Sometimes we need to ask ourselves, what are our priorities? Having in mind that if those who are invited refuse to attend, there is enough room to receive as many guests that want to attend. But sometimes guests needs to be persuaded, compelled. And the mean God uses to compel people to come is in the preaching of the gospel. The gospel is an invitation made through Jesus Christ, we are compelled, when we are told what Jesus states, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Act 4:12 says, salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved. And Acts 16:30-31 says that a man asked the Apostle Paul, sirs, what must I do to be saved? And the reply was and is, believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, you and your household. Jesus made it clear, whoever rejects this invitation is disqualified and somebody else is invited. If you already accept the invitation, bless you. But if you have not, take it now or you will miss forever. First, invited guests miss their place around the table. False communion with God. Revelation 3:20 says, here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me. God won't cancel the party because some refuse. He will call others. The loss is not God's, but those who miss the party. Are you in or out? Don't miss the banquet by making unwise excuses. Make God your priority. Make all the efforts to get in. Be willing to let go of everything else and you won't be disappointed. God bless you.